you can from the bodies, like jewelry, money, your wallet.
Okay. You gotta be quiet now, I'm taping this.
Keep going, Aaron.
All right. No. I'm gonna bring this up. This is not new for you. This was where we left off on Wednesday. But I want it to be fresh in your minds before we look at our story. All right? So if you remember, the Enuma Elish literally meant went on high. And this was the epic home mythos of the ancient Babylonians. So I don't want you to lose the context of what we're doing here. All of this is under the heading, the dignity of the human person. You're really going to have to grasp this, not just know what to write after the ... You're going to have to grasp this for my instructions on human sexuality to make sense. And by human sexuality, male and female. You're going to have to grasp this for, say, even the other sexuality, like within marriage and such. For immigration. No matter what we go into, if you don't grasp this and what follows, the dignity of the human person, we miss it. So these stories are supposed to tell us, these mythos, they tell us who we are as human people. Now, the nice thing about this philosophical component that's coming in here is we're all humans. Most people can't articulate what that means. I mean, just imagine like a fantastical situation where you're abducted into another realm by other aliens and they ask you, tell us, what does it mean to be human? You might have a difficulty articulating it. You might just start saying the things we do or what we're inclined, but you're going to have a hard time saying to be a human person means this. All right? So that's what we're after here. All right? So again, the story. In the beginning, we had water and two gods, Apsu and Chimu, right? And Apsu, the freshwater god, male. Chimu was the woman, female god. And salt water was evil. She herself had the personification of a dragon. Okay? Unlike the Greek gods who came down from the heavens to have sexual intercourse with mortals and other gods, even in the heavens, and that's how other gods were begotten, this union comes from the water, the fresh water and the salt water together forming silt, and from the silt forms all the lesser gods. So that's their story, how the other gods come to be. What happens is these two gods are the gods of water, and don't think of like other gods living inside them. Think of like little bodies inside of a big body. Don't anthropomorphize this. Think of water and other gods living in the water. So there were so many little gods, lesser gods, that the commotion was too much for them. Okay? So they really want to get rid of the lower gods. So what happens is this other god, Ea, he manages to put Apsu to sleep. He's a very powerful god. And him and another god beget Marduk. Now Marduk's the prominent player in this story. Marduk simply becomes the favorite child of all the gods, so much so that he's given the wind to play with as a toy. Okay, so if we already have all these other gods that form from the silt living within the water, causing commotion, now you got this Marduk dude just blowing winds across it, even bringing more commotion. They've had it. We got to do something here, right? So Chimu and her new husband Kingo, because Apsu's asleep, they set out to destroy all these gods. Marduk will champion all the lesser gods, but his condition is, upon me winning, I become the supreme god. All right. So Marduk does destroy Chimu. He then takes the body, rips the body in half, and now here we have the creation of the material world, right? He puts one of the domes in the sky, and then he fixes, like the heavens, and he fixes the stars and the moon and the sun and such, right? So they can regulate time. The other body then is used to create the formations on Earth. Okay, so you might see some separations of waters and such now. He then takes the eyes from the head, he just buries the head in the sand, and with his mighty spears, pierces the eyes, and from the eyes flow the Tigris and Euphrates River. Okay, if you know anything about that region, this is basically the life of their region, right? Periodic flooding and the sources, I mean, water is always a source of life. So if you live in that world and you hear that your God, Marduk, brought forth the waters but give you life, what are you hearing? He has control over all of nature. He's given us everything we need, right? That's you're starting to hear these stories that way. Then Marduk, listening to the murmurs of all the lesser gods who simply don't want to do all the work, they're tired of doing all the manual work that's necessary. So can you create humans for us? So Marduk does, and he takes the leftover body parts of Chimut and the blood, and he forms human beings. But human beings are then the slaves to the gods.
There are 2 twos in that sentence.
Yes, it is. 2-2. I'll get that. Thank you. So now, after all that's done, he wants, now that there's all these humans on earth, and there's land masses formed, and the waters are separated, he wants a temple built in his honor, in which he can reside in. And all the humans will be his slaves. So it's a really good story for the king of Babylon. If you're just a person living in there, not so much good. You're a servant, all right? That's their story. So if they wanted to look to their mythos to determine who they were, what does it mean to be a person in ancient Babylonia, this is how they would understand that. We're going to have a different story, okay? And by the way, the reason why I even like bringing up other stories is this. You know, the book of Genesis in the Bible is unique, okay? And we don't have other portions of books like that. So here's the problem that some fundamentalists and creationists make, is they don't take genre into consideration. So they look at the book of Genesis in the same way they would look at the book of Psalms, they would look at the book of the historical books, they would look at, say, the Gospels, they would look at the Pauline letters, or even the book of Revelation. To them, it's all one, genre. We understand it's different. It has nothing to do with telling us how the world was formed. It simply is telling us how we are as human people, all right? So that's important for us to know. So the word Genesis, remember I said Enuma Elish means when on high? Ancient documents always did that. The Catholic Church still does it. So when you see a document, Veritatis Splendor, the first words are, in English, the splendor of truth. Okay? This word, Bereshit, literally means in the beginning. So the word Genesis means in the beginning. So if you're a Star Trek fan and you saw the episode Genesis, it was talking about how things were created. If somebody says it's the genesis of my theory or the genesis of my story, it's how it formed, the origins of it. So we would literally say, in the beginning, here's what I thought, okay? The genesis of my thinking. Now, we say the priestly one because whether you're aware of it or not, there's 2 creation stories saddled side by side. And somebody might think, why would you put 2 creation stories that are similar but not exactly the same? Because they're not telling us how the world is formed. There's no competition between them, nor is there any contrast. The difference is they tell us a little bit something different about the human person, so they're both put in there, right? So the Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 1, goes to chapter 2, verse 3. That's the priestly one. That's a newer one. It's not as old as the one that comes after. The one that comes after in Genesis 2:4 is more anthropomorphic. There, God's walking around. He's talking. He forms things out of mud. You don't see that in this. This priestly one, picture like the king priest sitting up on his chair. I have a short video, you'll see. And it almost comes across as he's just making pronouncements. Let this happen. Let that happen. And then it happens. So that helps you understand if I ask you, is it the priestly one? There's other ones, Elohim and such. But nonetheless, so let me play the. Oh, I'm sorry.
Where did you say the other ones come from? Like, are they other books or?
No, the other one is directly after this. It actually starts in Genesis 2:4. All right, that's more anthropomorphic. So we get parts of that too. We'll talk we talk about male and female. We'll go to that one for this. So some people think that they're talking about the same thing, but the order of creation is different. And then, but the idea is that people will say, well, why would they put 2 creation stories that are somewhat different? Because they're not talking about how things were made. They're talking about who we are as people, okay? It's their story. So I want you to watch this video and pay close attention to where you might see differences. And then we're going to look at what some of the differences are. We're not going to exhaust it.
In the very beginning, nothing existed except for God. God spoke and created the heavens and the earth. When he first created the earth, it had no shape, and total darkness covered the earth. The Spirit of God was present, hovering over the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and light was created. God separated the light from the dark. The light was called day, and the darkness was called night. God saw the light, and he knew that it was good. This all happened on the first day of creation. God began to separate the waters that were on the surface of the earth with the waters that were above the earth. God created a great expanse between the water on the earth and the water that was above the earth. He called this expanse sky. This all happened on the second day of creation. Then God created dry land on the earth. The waters were gathered together in one place, and then the dry land appeared. The dry land was called earth. And the waters, they were called seas. God then commanded the earth to grow plants and trees. And the plants and trees grew. And then God once again knew, this is good. This all happened on the third day of creation. Next, God placed lights in the sky. He created the sun to shine during the day, and the moon and the stars to shine at night. God gave us lights to provide light on the earth, to separate day from night, and to help us track time in days and years. This all happened on the fourth day of creation. God created all living things that are in the water, and all the birds that fly. God made them multiply and filled the earth and the sea. God again saw that this was good. This all happened on the fifth day of creation. Then finally, God created the animals to cover the earth. The animals multiplied as well until they covered the entire earth. God looked down on his creation, and again he knew, this is good. Then God created people. God created people differently than anything else that he had created. God created people in his very own image. God took dust from the ground, and he made a man. God took his very own breath and breathed into the man, and the man became alive. God then took a rib from the man and created a woman to become the man's helper and spouse. God named them Adam and Eve. God asked the man and woman to care for the garden in which he had placed them in, and to take care of the earth. God told the man and woman, you can eat from any tree that I've created. He said the trees were food for all the wildlife and the animals and the people that he had created. God's one warning was about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Of this tree, God warned the man and woman, do not eat, or you will die. This all happened on the sixth day of creation. On the seventh day of creation, God rested from all of his work.
So, again, we're using the word mythos to differentiate it from something that's just a story, something that's not true, or we're more concerned with what does this tell us, what is the truth behind this, and what does it tell us about us as a human person, all right? So let's see if we can't pick up some differences. In the priestly mythos, there's only God. What in the Enuma Elish? What existed in the beginning with the Enuma Elish? Do you remember? How many? Yeah?
Two gods.
Two gods, and what else was there? What?
A lot of small gods.
Well, before that even, though. We're talking at the very beginning.
Seas.
Yeah, the water. So there were two gods, and there were water. In the priestly mythos, it's creation ex nihilo. Anybody know what that word means? Out of nothing. Yeah, X is out. So in the priestly mythos, there was only God, and everything came from nothing. How did creation come about contrastly in the Enuma Elish? What was used to make things? Do we remember?
So,
Well, that's where the two gods, that's where the lesser gods came. But what did Marduk use to make all of creation? What did he do? Do you remember? He ripped it in half. Yeah, Shemut. So actually, it's the creation from the body of the dead gods and the blood. All right? We're looking for distinctions here. In the priestly mythos, it was very orderly on the first day, on the second day, on the third day, and it went down the line. What would you think you could say about the Enuma Elish creation in contrast to that?
They kind of like happened as a result of something else, not as like a direct.
Yeah, well, that's for one. It was chaotic too. Okay, yours, Andrew, will really help with the next one. So there was fights and battles going on. Okay. In the priestly mythos, man was intentionally made. And not only was he intentionally made, but he was the pinnacle of all creation. He was the last of creation to be made. In other words, everything else was made for this man. What was the motivation for making the man in the Enuma Elish? Why did they want to make him? Yes, Jack? Yes. And because what did they not want to do? Do you remember? They didn't want to...
They didn't want to do the manual labor.
Yeah, they didn't want to do all the manual labor. It was an afterthought, right? It was just an afterthought. And Jackie, I'll actually use yours for the next one here. So not only was man intentional, but in our story, in our mythos, man was made to image his God. And as Jackie already said, in the Enuma Elish, man was to be a slave. So, there's other creation myths, but if you had to choose between these two, I'd rather be intentionally made so that I can image my Creator, who made me as the pinnacle of all creation, rather than on the result of a blood battle. It was an afterthought. Now that I am made, I'm to be His slave. All right. So you have to understand, it gives you an entirely different perspective of who you are as a human person. In their world, that forms their identity, their culture, all the things that I said Mythos does, and this forms, contrarily to us, what our relationship is with our Creator. Much different, okay? Now, we're just going to look at the beginning. We're not even going to list how we image God. That will wait for Monday. What we're going to do here is just talk a little bit, what does that mean, right? You've already got from Mr. Ware some of the critical terms and the etymology of the word and such, right? But when we say this concept links anthropology with Christology, what is anthropology? Does anybody know what that studies?
Study of bones, isn't it?
No, that's a branch, but
Study of human culture.
well, that would be culture anthropology.
It's the study of human beings as a species.
Yeah, just of man. Anthropos is just man. Okay, ology, the study. So we're studying man. So then Christology would be the study of who Christ is. So we are going to link how we understand the human person from how we understand Christ. All right? And all those other types of anthropology you talked about are all branches of it, right? So this would be actually this would be theological anthropology, right? So one of my graduate degrees is in philosophical anthropology. So just from reason alone, how can I determine who's the human person, right? But we're going to not use much of that. We're going to do more from Revelation here, okay? So it links these two things. Now, this means the importance of the incarnation is that Christ is key to the mystery of the human person. Christ is key to the mystery of the human person. We cannot take him out of the equation. We cannot understand who we are without understanding something about him. I can't do it today, but I've done this. Is anybody in peer listening here? Okay, I do. If I get the opportunity, I'll describe for you what the difference is between a problem and a mystery. A philosopher named Gabriel Marcel talked about it, and it really clears things up because we approach so many things in life, people, as problems. And once we understand what mystery is and we understand the distinction, it really clears up a lot of stuff for us. But anyway, we're not going to do that today. But the importance of the incarnation is that Christ becomes key to understanding the mystery of the human person. All right? So this notion of man as imaging Christ, it's challenged by the secular culture. We're going to see there's no way that they're going to get the same understanding of the human person as we are. So the notion of man as imaging Christ is challenged by the secular culture. So if we have clashes with the secular culture, it's going to be with this person, Jesus Christ, right? We will see that evidentially in, gender fluidity and theories like that, okay? But that'll be another day. Yeah, it's imaging Christ is challenged by the secular culture.
What was the first one?
Key to understanding the human person. Again, I think a good way of doing this is listen to what I say first and then write down what's up there second. Because when you get into college and you're going to get sporadic notes, they may not do a ... but they're going to put a concept up there that they're going to expand on it. And you could always reread that rather than try to get them to repeat what they said. Just a suggestion. So then the imaging of Christ in man, and this is really important, it links holiness to human fulfillment. The imaging of Christ in man then links holiness to human fulfillment. We spend our entire life trying to be fulfilled. And we do it in all kinds of ways. And we never really do it satisfactorily, all right? And you name it. We could do it with relationships, whether sexual or not, with drugs, whether legal or not, with conniving. Our journal today about not letting people into our hearts, right? That welcoming. So maybe we like putting other people down. Maybe that's the way that we find some little fulfillment. In other words, we are going to go through our lives looking for these little mini victories that don't last. Maybe in like a person's diet, we can call it eating just carbs, right? There's nothing there that truly satisfies, all of the time it feels fulfilling. So what we're talking about here is the imaging of Christ. It links those two things. It links holiness and it links our fulfillment. Now, I put this up in its entirety because I think it's such a great quote. It's not mine. And here's where I'm really trying to reorient you to understand what morality is. For instance, what all this means, the impact for Catholic morality is that too often young and older people see Christianity as a set of rules which identifies what's permitted and what's forbidden. Do the permitted stuff, you go to heaven. Do the forbidden stuff, you go to hell. This is how people look at it. This is a very childish, immature understanding of the faith. And I'm trying to break that of you, right? So remember I said you would never in a million years do this in a relationship with a spouse. If you're married, and he said, well, Mr. Bujno gave me rules for being married. He said, okay, first of all, we have to be faithful to each other, so we're doing that, okay? We have to think of each other, and like even when we're not together. And when we are intimate, we should be just in our own presence. We should not be distracted with other people's or images. And we have to be sincere. And we should be also have a little bit of humor. And we also should look out for each other's physical well-being. And also should be concerned about your spiritual and psychological welfare. Those are the rules. Now, if you sat there and told your spouse these are the rules, they would look at you like, what are you, nuts? I will do all those things for you because that's what love does. Okay, that's the same approach we need to have to this. So that's why 2 days ago I gave you the distinctions that St. Basil put up. If you're going to do these things and motivated by either fear or reward, you're either a slave or a mercenary. But when it's motivated by love, then you become sons and daughters. Okay? The second part of this is equally true. First of all, the permitted and forbidden, they're all secondary. People make those primaries. They're all secondary. What is primary, comes before all of this, is that we seek the good in order to attain proper human fulfillment. But we have to be able to identify what the good is. And if you're not good at identifying what the good is, you're going to be distracted by the counterfeit good, which is why I did that exercise with you. You're going to seek cleverness rather than wisdom, okay? You're going to seek titillation rather than beauty. And you're not even going to know. You're not even going to be conscious of you doing this, because all you're trying to do is seek fulfillment. So you're going to look for fulfillment wherever you can get it, and like everybody else, we're weak. We'll go after what's easier rather than what's harder. Genuine goods have to be identified, but you can't identify a genuine good until you believe in an objective truth and beauty. If you don't believe there's nothing objective, then you can't. There's nowhere to go with this, all right? But my point is all that is a choice. Don't think that, we all kind of float around and this is like our lot in life. We are choosing how we approach the world. We are choosing our worldview. The big word is metaphysics. We're choosing how we see the world. We just don't like to think that. We like to think that it's out. That's another thing I would love to get into. Man's problem with freedom is we really don't want it. Because freedom brings us anxiety. We like to think we have it, but in the end, I really don't want it. That kind of thing. So anyway, this is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to seek these goods in order to attain our proper fulfillment. So then what gets separated if we're not doing that? What gets separated is holiness from human fulfillment. We separate holiness from human fulfillment. Without Christ as part of the idea, if it's only secular, then holiness and human fulfillment seem odd. And if you still think holiness has something to do with the forbidden and the permitted, you're missing it. So in other words, if Christ is the center of this, I'm only going to find fulfillment in through Him. And I'll never do it entirely here, right? There's something else that goes on. And what does man forfeit if you don't have that element of Christ in it? What you forfeit is there's nothing transcendent of you as a human person. You will seek all kinds of transcendent. I'm just thinking outside of ourselves. There's nothing transcendent of the human person that you're seeking. So everything's self-contained. Now, this can even be in relationships. You don't need to know this now. When we get into human sexuality, I'll explain to you that sometimes a man and a woman will say, this is all we need. All we need is you. When you really get into that, and I'll have to explain it deeper later, that's called mutual egoism. In other words, if I showed you a perverted understanding of love, most people's idea of love is what they see of themselves and others. That's not love. You're standing in front of a mirror. Okay? This has to be transcendent. This pulls you out of yourself. So our entire world gets self-contained. So let me show you something. I'm a voracious reader. I read like 3 journals a day. I'm working my way through like a book a week. I'm really kind of on like a philosophical psychology kick. So I was reading this article by Sania Lure, The Problem with Rich Kids. The idea is that they used to, and psychology always proves what everybody already knows. The idea is that in the a couple decades ago, you found a lot of drug abuse, stress, and such amongst the poor class. What all their studies are showing is that you're finding more of that in the upper class than the lower class because of parents striving for particular achievement. So she concludes by saying, for some highly educated adults, a sense of success as parents rests on the splendor of their own children's accomplishments. It's not a healthy burden for them to bear, or for parents in shaping the next generation. They have to ask themselves, prestige, power, and privilege are being transmitted, but at what cost? I had another article, no sense to bring up. For young people, the more affluent you are, the higher suicide rate. Why would that be? You wouldn't think it, right? What I'm trying to say is, when these goods get twisted, when we start seeking the counterfeit goods, they're not going to fulfill. We've disconnected holiness from our own fulfillment. And that will